Hi, it's Tash from Foxes and Brown Bears Tarot, and today I'm doing a walkthrough of the Science Tarot. I'm very excited. This has been on my wish list forever, and I hadn't bought it mainly because the postage from the US was going to cost me a lot, and I haven't been spending a lot of money this year, particularly in the last quarter. I've pretty much bought very little. And so I thought I'd treat myself, and so it arrived and I'm super excited. I do love science, and I was super keen to get this one. Like, it's super cool. So I got it from the Exploratorium online, and you can also find out more on sciencetarot.com. And this is like super cool. So they original artworks and kind of depicting mythic human experiences and archetypes, right? But in this case, it's more to do with science, and particularly astronomy, chemistry, physics, and biology. And so yes, very cool. I thought I'd go through it. So it's a nice little two-piece box, and it comes with a cute little book. It's just a skinny little book, and it gives you like quite a lot of information. It gives you a page for each card. It's kind of cool, and then it's got some spreads at the back as well. So I'm going to go through, and what I'll do is I'll talk about the system of how it's laid out as I get to each suit. So with the major arcana, basically what you have are they the big science stories, the big concepts, the big discoveries, the big theories in science. And then the minor arcana are split up into the different areas of science. So having a look, so you get this little title card, which is kind of cool. These are the backs. I love them. They're so beautiful. This little blackboard, the microscope. It is reversible, and it is a bit glossy. Like, they are quite glossy cards. And they're probably not the best card stock, but I really don't care because I wanted this so badly. And I actually want it for the concepts within it. I'm obsessed with science. I love reading science books. And so this is just a very cool. And so this is just a little card that shows some of the creators. So there's a few creators there, and then the artwork's done by different people. So different suits are done by different people. And really though, it's still a very cohesive deck. So even though it's not collaboration in a sense, in a way, the art style is very similar throughout. So that's really cool. All right. So let's have a look at the cards. So I might just zoom in slightly so you can see them nicely. Okay, so what I'll do is I will point out some of the things as well from the book as we go, just because I think that adds meaning, and this is kind of interesting to think about. So the Fool is amazing. I love this Fool so much because what it's really showing, at least to me, is that you learn all this stuff through books. So you kind of learn, you accrue all this knowledge. But in the end, if you really want to prove your ideas and you want to have a concrete understanding, you have to take the leap into proper experimentation. You need to try it out practically. And I think that's really cool, particularly since his nose is in the book. He has to take that leap. His lab coat's flung over his shoulder because he's going to have to enter the lab and get his hands dirty effectively. So that to me is like the coolest Fool card. So this one here is representing the ribosome. So this is cool because ribosomes are really they kind of read and translate your DNA. And so it's really getting to, it's not looking at the actual blueprint of life, it's looking at what brings that blueprint into life. And that is the magician. It's bringing ideas into reality. And it's really cool that this is all coming out of the magician's hats. And so it's the idea that you are literally basically birthing rabbits out of a hat. So it's a magician's trick, but really it's through the DNA, through activating the ribosomes. And you do also have all the symbols there. So you've got your fire, your Bunsen burners, which represent wands as well. And you've got your beakers, just cups, and scalpel, which is swords. And then you have your magnifying glass, which is pentacles. So that's really cool. And I also like that you see all the letters around there, and they all your elements that make up the DNA. So that's kind of cool. Yep. So awesome. All right. So the High Priestess is really referring to the guy Auguste Curie, who came up with a structure for benzene. This has eluded people for quite some time, and he actually dreamt it. He had a dream that a snake was biting its own tail, and so he realized that the reason that benzene didn't seem to make sense structurally is because it actually formed a ring. And so that's kind of cool, because it's really pointing to that bringing knowledge from, I guess, arcane places. And it's really cool. And you still have pomegranates, and you still have that kind of the pillars there. There's kind of moving beyond the veil into your dream world. So I really like that representation. The Empress is Mendel's peas. And that is super cool because it's referring to Gregor Mendel's experiment of peas that really became the foundation of our understanding of the inheritance of traits. And so it's really looking at how things grow, and I guess how things are passing on. And so there's that birthing into the future in a sense. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing. And you actually have the little chart there of recessive and dominant genes as well there. So very cool. All right, so crystallization is the concept for the Emperor. And this is just perfect really, because it's looking at the crystal structure, the idea that you can form, I guess, structure out of something that seems quite unstructured. And I particularly like that you have this very rigid ruler as well in her pocket. So it's that idea that it's not just about structure, it's about firm rule as well. So really nice representation. The Professor is the Hierophant. And once again there, I think it's the idea that we draw our knowledge from all of the giants who have come before us. All these people have dedicated their lives to learning things, and we're learning from them, and then we build on their knowledge. All right, the Lovers of the Binary Star. So this is really cool because it's the idea that it's the perfect balance. So gravitationally, they're at the correct distance from each other, and they balance each other perfectly so that they remain, I guess, in orbit with each other in a sense. And so they remain connected because they're at the right distance. If they were too close, they'd collide. If they were too far, they'd break away. And what's great about this is they're connected, but they're also individual entities. And so I think it's a really great way of representing the lovers. The Chariot is very cool because it's really harnessing the powers of nature to develop technology. And I really like that you're looking at the very first aeroplane, and then we're looking at a rocket, and just showing how far technology has actually come through harnessing and understanding those laws of nature. Strength is about the nuclear force, and this is the strongest force, which basically holds the protons and neutrons together in the nucleus of an atom. And ultimately, I mean, because that's the strongest force, it becomes, I guess, the building block of everything around us. And so it's an inner strength in a sense. It's a force we don't see, but it's there. So that's kind of really cool. All right, the Hermit is Fermat's last theorem. So I believe Fermat wrote this kind of mathematical formula with solution in the margins of a book, but he basically said he didn't have enough room to show the whole proof. And mathematicians spend centuries trying to work this out. He was like 1600s, I think, 17th century, and it was only really proven in the 1990s. And so once again, it's that idea that you just you take time out and devote yourself to trying to solve a problem within. So, and you cool little candle there too. This is perfect. Wheel of Fortune is Schrodinger's cat. So it's that thought experiment by Schrodinger where so you don't know if the cat's dead or alive, and the only way to know is to look inside. But it's that idea could go either way, right? And so that's the Wheel of Fortune. Things could be good, things could be bad. We don't know. Things are changeable, and that's really cool. And particularly it's with time as well, because the thing that was actually killing the cat was a radioactive element that had to decay. And so when it hits a certain level, the cat's dead, but we don't know whether it's decayed yet. So it's a matter of time. Justice is the conservation of energy. This is really cool because it's that basic law that all energy no energy can ever be lost in the system. Like our universe is a closed system. It's the idea that the amount of energy around us will always remain the same. All it will do is change form. So it might be kinetic energy, so movement, or it might turn into heat, or it might turn into light, or it might turn into force of some kind, but the energy will remain the same. And so the idea here is it's that balance, okay? So you've got restoration of balance. It's the fact that these rules can't be broken, okay? So it's full justice, like we're actually living by these rules, and these laws cannot be broken. So I think that's kind of cool. Hangman is potential energy. So that's awesome, because it's that idea that there's no energy at this stage. This is potential energy. So basically you're not seeing an outpouring of energy at this stage because the rock is perfectly balanced. The second the rock falls over, then that becomes energy, becomes kinetic energy. But at the moment it's potential. It could happen. It's a bit like when you pull back an elastic band, and while you're still holding it, all the energy within that elastic band is potential, and then you let it go. And it's the same sort of thing there. And I also like that it does look like the Hanged Man. And also the idea that in this place, I guess, of limbo, of waiting, you can often have different perspectives. So that bird is able to sit on the top of this now and see the world in a different way because the rock is still upstanding. So I thought that was kind of cool. And this is my favorite card in the deck, I think, because this is amazing. What better way to depict death than a phase transition? So what you've got really there are the three phases of water. So you've got this skull out of ice. And what's happening as the sun's coming up, the ice is melting, converting into steam. And so that structured form is disappearing, it's dying, but it's transforming into something else. And so basically all it's doing is changing its state. It's not being eliminated, it's not being killed, but it's no longer available in the same form. So that's kind of cool. Temperance is an interesting depiction. So it's looking at that idea, that uncertainty. So looking at Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, where we can't know the location and speed of any molecule at any, subatomic particle at any time. And it's an interesting way to depict this. It goes back to that folk tale about the blind people coming towards an elephant, and one thinks it's a snake, the other one thinks it's, like a tree, and the other one thinks it's like a whip or something, depending on what part of the elephant they've held onto. And it's just going to show there that I guess we can't know everything, and it's about tolerance for other people's perspectives and moderation in our views, and an understanding that we need to keep just exploring. So it's kind of cool. the devil is unquestioning. And so this is interesting because it brings up some, I guess, that idea of, can we become so bound to the pursuit of knowledge that we fail to recognize the impact it has on people? Is it technology for technology's sake? Is it knowledge for knowledge's sake? Is it dangerous? Is it good? So it's an interesting concept there. Do we become overly shackled? Does it become an addiction? The Tower is the atom bomb. So this is really cool because obviously it's the ultimate destruction of something. Best possible approach. And in New Mexico, when they first tested it, they did actually drop it from a tower. So that's what this depicts. And it's showing the catastrophe that can take place following all this knowledge. The Star is about compassionate action. So this kind of brings in that sort of, not quite ethical issues, because I think the devil represents the ethical issues of science a bit more there. But this one is basically looking at how can we use science for good? And so it's the hope in the distance that all this knowledge we've accrued is actually going to benefit humankind to some extent. We're going to throw medicine back into the world in a sense. So it's kind of cool. I like that. The Moon is really looking at drugs. So it's that idea that you've got all these drugs that affect our nervous system. So things like morphine from poppies for pain. You've got, I think they've mentioned, they did list some of the others. So you have ipratropium from belladonna that treats asthma, aspirin from willow to relieve migraine. So it's that idea that you've got all these things that have effects that are under the surface. And so I think that's kind of cool. And you've got all the different structures of those particular substances. The Sun is light. It's a duality of light. Light's a wave and a particle all at once. But ultimately it's light, isn't it? Which is the light of the sun. So that's kind of cool. Judgment is awesome. It's about natural selection. And it points to the Industrial Revolution, where you had all these moths that were white, could be white or grey, depending. It was just a gene within them. And before the Industrial Revolution, the white moths were the majority because they tended to camouflage better. And so they weren't eaten by birds as much. But once the Industrial Revolution came up and you had things covered in I guess you had smog, and then you had all the, I guess, the pollution settling on trees and statues and all those things that moths hang out on, they found that the white moths were being eaten more. And so what actually happened is the white moths started dying down, and the majority of moths became grey moths. And it's showing natural selection in a very short period of time, in fact. And what I like about this is it's showing transmutation, it's showing transformation, it's showing how you let go of parts of yourself that are no longer useful, and you embrace new parts that are useful. So it's a perfect card for Judgment, in my opinion. And then the World is grand unified theory. So this is basically the holy grail of science. It's the idea that we have a really good understanding of the four forces of nature. So we have gravity, we have electromagnetism, we have the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force, and we understand all those very well. But ultimately, we have no theory that joins them all together. And so there's no theory that kind of links Newtonian physics to quantum physics and all these forces. Like, how do they operate together? And so I guess that is the Holy Grail. It's the world. This will be the culmination of all knowledge. All right, so looking now onto the Minor Arcana. And I'm sorry, this probably will take quite a long time, this video, because it's awesome. And so the way the Mayan Arcana is sorted out is you've got 4 different colors. So they're represented as different colors, but they all cover different branches of science. And so the Wands one is about astronomy. It's about astrophysics, astronomy. And so that's really cool. Now, the other thing they do there is they represent these as the Bunsen burners. And then they represented each of the cards as the hero's journey. And this was interesting to me because it's normally the major arcana that's depicted as the hero's journey, and in this case was actually the minor arcana. And so what they did here, and I'll show you the section in the book on this, is they've looked at step 1, which is the ace, is a call to adventure. Then the 2 is refusal, the call or reluctant hero. 3 is meeting the wise mentor. 4 is the threshold that marks the beginning of the adventure. Number 5 is the initiation by ordeal, task, or test. 6 is the resolution of trials and revisiting the mentor. 7 is the return of new knowledge into everyday life. 8 is the using new knowledge to defeat the dragon. 9 is the death of the old self, creation of new self. And 10 is the completion of the quest. And so each of the suits follows this particular process, and then the court cards are represented as key people in science over time. And so the page is the explorer. So this is a seeker who goes out to try and find out about the world. And so it's symbolized by dopamine. The knight is the innovator. This is the person who goes out and actually researches and invents, and symbolized by serotonin. The queen is the storyteller. So this is where intelligence and empathy comes together. And this is oxytocin. And the king is the visionary. And this is where you drive the study forward into new territories. Okay, with vision and hope. It's symbolized by testosterone. So I thought this was really cool. It's a really interesting way to depict them. So looking at the Wands suit. So here you got the nebula, which is really the beginning of it all, right? It's the initial spark that begins the formation of a star. So perfect ace. 2 is the star nursery. So this is where stardust starts gathering material, but now it could either become a star or remain formless. And so it's the planning ahead, it's the direction, deciding which way to go. There's a choice there in terms of where the creative spark's going to go. The 3 is collision. And so this is looking at quasars, and these are collisions between galaxies, and where you can basically, this is where you spark everything, right? You can create a massive black hole from this. So it's bringing 2 forces to create something new. This is going out and meeting the world. So 4 is the brown dwarf, which is kind of interesting. So it's a star that doesn't quite become very brilliant. So it's quite a dull star. It doesn't form quite enough in terms of energy. So there's a too little mass, which then leads to too little gravity for proper fusion. So you don't get a bright star. But what this is it's a very stable star though. So it's looking at the stability of the 4 of Wands. 5 is fusion. So if you think about nuclear fusion, but this in this case, it's if you think about stars like the center of our sun, the energy comes from fusion. And so it's an enormous amount of energy. But in doing this is actually collision, critical mass, pressure, it's violence. And so it is a challenge. It's a challenging conflict between forces. 6 is equilibrium. This is where the sun, the star, has a perfect state of equilibrium, okay, in terms of the gravity, the mass, and all that. And so it's, I guess, had its success. It's successfully formed a decent star. 7 is expansion. So this is the red giant. And it's a very explosive stage of a star's life. And I guess it's, yeah, I mean, I find this one probably, I'm struggling a little bit more with this one in terms of the Rider-Waite Smith. But I think the idea, if you're looking at it numerologically, it makes quite a lot of sense. And then 8 is the Big Bang, perfect, because of course you've got beginning of it all, the speed of the formation of the universe. And then 9 is space. So here you're looking at that moment of reflection. And this is where you've kind of created your new self. But you're always going to pay the price with the achievements, because all this has come from a lot of conflict, a lot of fighting, a lot of like explosions. So you've kind of, I guess you're worn and tired, but also complete. And then 10 is the supernova. So this is where you're going to, it's like the death of a star in a sense. And this will bring all this energy. So it's kind of overburdened with information, with energy, with mass, and then it's just going to start something new. All right, and then the page of the explorer here is Caroline Herschel. So she was an astronomer in the 1800s who discovered a number of comets, and so that's kind of cool. The knight is Hypatia. So she's the innovator, and she was from Alexandria, and she was like an astronomer, mathematician, and she discovered the astrolabe, which is used to predict astronomical positions. That's kind of cool. The queen is Carl Sagan as the storyteller, so he was an astrophysicist. So kind of cool. And the visionary there, the king, is Galileo Galilei, who obviously realized that the Earth actually orbits the sun and not the other way around. And so he transformed science and human history. All right, so then we go on to the Pentacles, which are represented by a magnifying glass. And once again, they also follow the hero's journey. So the Ace of Pentacles is a formation. And also note here that the Pentacles are now representing geology and chemistry. And so it's, I guess, earthy stuff that you can actually hold on to. Whereas the wands is all about the creation of the universe in a way, that spark. The Pentacles are about concrete sciences that you can touch, rocks, elements, I guess, substances of any kind. And so formation really is looking at the fact that with gravity, with the creation of the universe, you started developing all these fragments of things. So you got the emergence of all these molecules. 2 is antimatter, and so this is really cool because it's the kind of the polar opposites, aren't they? And so it's like that juggling of the 2 pentacles, and it's, I guess, we wrestling those choices, and so that's kind of cool. The 3 is bonding. So these are 2 hydrogen atoms linking to an oxygen atom to form water. And this is cool because it's collaboration. So both oxygen and hydrogen are highly reactive gases. But when they join together, they form this molecule that is essential to all life, and that has such unique properties. And so it's the power of collaboration, which is perfect, really. The 4 of Pentacles is the meson dance, and so this is where you have 2 subatomic particles, a quark and an antiquark, joining together. And so I guess it's interesting because it's a weird one. So I guess they're kind of holding on at this stage. So yeah, it's gathering of the resources. 5 is catastrophe. Now this one is actually looking at the oxygen catastrophe. So it's the idea that at the beginning of the formation of the Earth, in a way, billions of years ago, there was no oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. And then you eventually started seeing cyanobacteria, which started producing oxygen. Now, this is great for life as we know it, but all the life, the majority of the life at the time, actually found oxygen toxic and couldn't survive on oxygen. So as the oxygen levels came up, there was a mass extinction. And so this is kind of cool, the Five of Pentacles, because it's an ultimate catastrophe for those life forms. Then you have 6 is geothermal, and which is kind of cool because it's looking at geothermal energy. And if you think about the 6 of Pentacles, it's pretty much, this is a life-giving fire of the earth. 7 is glacial. So this is looking at these tremendous forces that take so long, don't they? And so it's that idea of glaciers take forever to form out those, to carve out the mountains. And so what's actually happening is this is a perfect representation of the seven of Pentacles, because it's that hard work, trying to learn something, to develop a skill, and it takes a while. It's about patience in doing so. 8 is continental drift, and so this is kind of cool because once again here you're looking at the movement of our planet. It's the creation of our planet as we know it. Okay, so it's where the continents are at the moment is due to this. And so this has been a work in progress, I guess. 9 is the aurora. And this is kind of nice because, I mean, ultimate beauty, isn't it? It's this creations in itself, great rewards, just showing the northern lights. And basically just the nitrogen oxygen atoms are energized by the sun at particular points of magnetic fields. And so yes, it's personal success in a way. You've achieved something amazing. 10 is earthly riches, which fits beautifully. And I really like the idea that it's all layering on top of each other. So there's an element of legacy. There's a movement through time. You know, what we are today is a culmination of what has come before. Then the page is Otto Lowy. He discovered that basically it was chemical pulses that carry the messages between nerves. So people used to think it was an electrical impulse, but he discovered that it was actually chemical. And so this was, and he did this few quite substantial experimentation with frogs' hearts. So it's just saying, like, clear explorer trying to discover something new. The Knights is Jabir ibn Hayyan, who was basically transformed alchemy into modern chemistry at the time. He was a natural philosopher in the Middle East. And this is kind of cool because he actually introduced the first proper scientific methods to understand chemical reactions. And so really, really important innovator. The Queen is Frank Oppenheimer, who is basically, obviously worked on the Manhattan Project in developing the atomic bomb. And I guess it's an interesting one because it's trying to balance that experimentation, innovation, knowledge with ethics, but yes, very practical, a lot of practicality as well. The King then is Marie Curie, and obviously she coined the term radioactivity, discovered radium and polonium, which are radioactive elements. And here you can see the atomic structure for that, well, like in a very simplistic way. But of course, what this does is it shows that the practical, I guess, applications of such knowledge, radioactivity, which can be so dangerous, can also bring about X-rays, for example. And she actually brought in these little portable X-ray labs, which then made surgery possible in the battlefield. So here you see the trenches of World War One. All right, so then going on to swords, which are represented by scalpels. And these represent physics and mathematics. And so it's, I guess, the mental fields of science, whereas the others are very much about either looking up into the skies and dreaming, or it's about actual concrete experimentation. So in this case, the ace is reductionism. So this is an idea that you're wanting to try and understand all the elements of how the universe works. You're trying to break it down so you can understand all the reactions, all the parts that make up the whole. 2 is action, and here it's Isaac Newton's idea that if every action causes an equal and opposite reaction. And this fits quite nicely because it's that choice, isn't it? Which way you're going to go. You can leave it suspended or you can bring it down, like in terms of a lever. 3 is a revolution. And in this case, it's really looking at that Earth-centered model versus the solar-centered model. But this is a massive departure. So it's when they showed that the Earth was not the center of the universe. Whilst this was a great scientific development, this brought enormous heartbreak in a sense, because it completely challenged our understanding of the world, of, I guess, society, of religion, of science. And so there's a departure from something that we truly believed and held on to. And so it's a loss. 4 is mathematics, and this one is cool because it's just mathematics in general. And if you think about it, it's stepping back and going, well, instead of like looking out there, I'm going to work this out mathematically. I need to take the time to think this through. So I thought that was kind of cool. Then you have 5 is relativity. And I like this because it's Einstein's theory of relativity. So it's that thought experiment, you know, that a train can, if it can travel close to the speed of light, the clock on the train will show that only a small amount of time has passed, but it might have been many decades since the train began its journey. So time is relative, and you can see that. So you can see the different times on the clock in a sense. So not really, but it's the idea that's where it's going. And I think that works well because it's that perception that things are different if you look for the opportunities elsewhere. 6 is the quantum sea. And basically what this is looking at quantum electrodynamics, which I guess predicts the behavior of the subatomic world. So it's kind of, it helps to understand what is happening, but at the same time, I guess, I don't know, it leaves us still with all these questions. So it's kind of, it's an interesting one, that one. 7 is chaos theory. And so this is that idea that a butterfly's flapping its wings can cause a tornado somewhere else. So how complex systems are connected. And so I think that's kind of cool for a 7 of swords, because I think with this one, we're looking at the sailing into better understanding, right? We're moving away from the uncertainties of science. Here we're kind of looking at, well, our actions can affect something that we can't even be aware of, really. 8 is the collider. So what's happening there is that it's an interesting one, because I guess I was trying to understand the purpose of using this, but it's this idea that we need to understand the small elements. Like this, the smaller we go in terms of our understanding, the bigger the equipment kind of gets with regard to that. And so I think we kind of trapped in this, aren't we? It's a bit of a myopic vision. So I think that that's the concept of this card. It's very pretty though. 9 is a black hole. And so makes total sense for a 9 of swords. So it's the idea that it's just so intense, right? And just, it's a dark time, it's all consuming and inescapable. Okay, so it feels like there's no hope, possibility of escape, all darkness. Yeah. And 10 is uncertainty. So once again, it's this idea that no matter what reductionism, no matter how much we go for that reductionism represented in the ace, ultimately there's so much we can't possibly know. And we just keep going further and further. So we crack open like the earth to some degree, and then the plants and animals, and then sort of microscopic stuff. But then things still get smaller and smaller, and there's more and more and more to find. And there's greater knowledge at every level that we explore. And so I think it's idea that when Heisenberg came up with uncertainty, it realized that there's actually things need to change. Like it's a dead end, isn't it? We can't actually know. We learned, and then we got to the point where we actually can't know. And that is a true blow. It's a true death in a sense to reductionism. So that's really cool. And then the page is Robert Hooke. He invented the microscope, and so started really looking at cells and cell biology. Very cool. Dimitri Mendelev is perfect for the innovator or the knight, because he's the one who discovered basically the periodic table of elements. So he arranged the chemicals in such a way that they made sense. And he took forever, and the way he did it was writing them all up on cards and manipulating until he discovered a structure that made sense. And it was amazing because he actually even left gaps, and which have then subsequently been filled by chemicals elements that hadn't been discovered in his lifetime, and yet he knew they had to be there because of their properties. Like there was no other element that fit those particular properties in that spot of the periodic table of elements. So I guess a true innovator. Storyteller or queen is Ernest Heckle. He is a biologist, and he also drew he made all these illustrations of microscopic life and really helped to understand Darwin's theories. And so kind of cool. Yeah. And so helped characterize all the organisms. So brought it all together. And then the visionary is Charles Darwin. And once again, it's a massive scientific theory of natural history. He took it to a whole new level. So pretty amazing. He kind of looked at all the component parts, rebuilt it into a massive idea. All right, so looking at cups. Now cups are represented by beakers, and they are depicting biology and ecology. So, all right, so ace is integration. So this is really cool because it's looking at the mitochondria. And it's this idea that initially the belief is that we have these mitochondria in our cells that are kind of the energy powerhouses, but they have slightly different DNA. And so the idea is that way back in the past, these two cells came together, and cells actually, and the mitochondria actually became engulfed, integrated into these cells, and it became the symbiotic relationship that has worked for life. And this is the origin of the mitochondria. So it's a very cool depiction, particularly for the Ace of Cups, because it's that spark of a new relationship in a way, and symbiotic as well. So it's benefit to both, because the mitochondria are protected in that environment, but then the cell gets energy from the mitochondria. The Two of Cups is alliance, and in this case you're looking at lichen, and lichen basically is made up of algae and fungi, and it becomes once again the symbiotic relationship that's really important, because the algae is able to use photosynthesis to create food for the fungus, but then the fungus provides a structure for the algae. And in this way, they can live in environments that other plants cannot. So it's a very, I guess it's a balanced relationship where they both contribute their own unique elements. All right, and then 3 moves on to symbiosis. And here, once again, it's the same sort of concept, but the idea that orchids grow better if they have this fungus in the ground, okay, because this actually helps the orchid roots to absorb water and minerals. So I guess it's that coming together, it's that collaboration and relationship. 4 is dormancy. This is really cool because it looks at the lungfish, who can actually burrow into mud at times of drought and that, and survive in the mud for months, in fact, and waiting till the water comes back. So this is cool for the 4 of Cups, because it's the idea that he's kind of just sitting there and he hasn't even recognized that the water's there is some water there. He's just in his little hole there. 5 is wildfire. So ultimate sorrow, isn't it? Ultimate loss, where everything's kind of dying, but at the same time you'll see new growth from wildfires. So often that will bring, it helps certain seeds to sprout. It brings about new life ultimately. And so it shows that even at the greatest loss, something new and beautiful can emerge from it. 6 is a return to the sea. And this is that idea that, like whales and dolphins and the mammals of the sea, I guess, basically are water creatures, but they have a lot of elements in common with land animals, of course. They can, I guess, breathe air and things like that, and they bear live young and whatnot. So the theory is that they would have been sea creatures who left the sea to go onto land, and then at some point returned to the sea. And so this is kind of cool for the 6 of Cups, because you're looking at nostalgia, which is cool. It's looking back at the old days. 7 is choices. So this is kind of cool because it's looking at that, I guess, prey-predator relationship, where it's like, which one am I going to pick, right? And it's those quick snap decisions that a predator has to make in the wild. It's the quick snap decisions that prey have to make. Which way will I run? Which one will I pick? Which is the weakest? Which is the most likely to succeed? 8 is the cocoon. And in this case, I think this is just perfect, because what it's showing is that even though like a cocoon's really safe or whatever, you outgrow it, and eventually you need to emerge and experience a new world, a new life. And then 9 is emergence. And so this is an ant colony, and which is pretty amazing, because once again, it just shows this amazing complex system that has been achieved. So it's rewards, and it's kind of, look how much you can achieve. Yeah, pretty amazing. And then 10 is really evolving and evolution. So it's looking at the idea that everything we have, you know, has evolved. It's like, look at the diversity we have, look at the amazing things we have, you know, and we all part of it, and right, it's life in all its beauty. Yeah, so really, really pretty. All right, so then the page is Maria Sibylla Merian, who painted insects and plants in the 1600s. And the idea here is that she would just paint them, so she kept them alive, whereas most people at that time would just like pin them and preserve them in alcohol and things like that, where she kind of did it in a little way. It was this kind of more passionate and pathetic way of exploring the natural world. And then the knight is Barbara Mcclintock, and she discovered transposons. And so these are pieces of DNA that produce different effects depending on where they are. Ooh, apologies. In the sequence. So depending on where they are on the chromosome, they will bring about different effects. So a true innovator in the field. The Queen here is John Muir, and he basically explored the Sierra Nevada mountains and very much into ecology and reverence for nature and just that preservation of the wilderness. And then finally you have David Bohm as the king, and he was in nuclear physics, and he collaborated with Albert Einstein and Oppenheimer, but also a great philosopher. So he kind of combined all those elements, and he basically looked at all the aspects of life and kind of thought about, I guess, the underlying order of it all. And so it's looking at new vision, new hope. It's encompassing it all. So yes, so that has been a very long video. I hope that has been useful. But what I want to do before I go is I actually want to show you a deck that I have been pairing with the Science Tarot. And I'm very excited about this pairing, actually. And it is with the Wisdom of Trees Oracle by Jane Stroffers. And this is just beautiful together. Like, I was looking at like, what deck could I possibly pair with this one? And oh my gosh, look at that. Like, I guess they've got the same sort of colorful borders. They just look lovely together. And because they both have that nature theme as well, I think it works beautifully. So I'm very, very happy with this pairing, may I say. And I'll show you some of the other, you know, like some of the other colors as well. It really looks beautiful. So yeah, so if anyone has a Science Tarot, this one's a good one to pair it with, I think, in my opinion. Let me know if you pair it with something different. But yeah, I think the art style is similar in a way. The colors are very, very similar, and I think it's just really beautiful. Look at that. Yeah, and just that whole nature theme works very nicely. So yeah, so that's my perfect pairing for the Science Tarot. Very, very happy with that pairing. Anyway, so thank you for watching if you're still around, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.